Hello, I'm Shiv Berry. I'm a T21 student, Tuck first year student, and we will be having Hugh Thomas join us. Oh, here we go. Hugh, welcome.
Uh-huh. This works. Excellent. Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, I hear you.
I'm
Shiv Berry. I'm a T21 student, Tuck first year student, and we will be having Hugh Thomas join us. Okay. Oh, here we go. Hugh.
All right, this works. Good. Excellent. Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? There's quite a lot of feedback here, so I don't know if we are well synced up. Oh, 1 second. Hang on. I seem to be in. Cool.
Okay.
Testing.
Great.
Are we good?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, 1 second.
Everyone. Hugh is the co-founder of Counterfactual Ventures and is a new impact venture studio building companies in the alternative protein industry, which is our main topic of discussion for the rest of the day. We're going to have a lot of startups and a lot of firms talk about how they're occupying this space. So Hugh was the CEO of the cultivated meat startup New Age Meats, and was also the co-founder of a community renewable energy consultancy scene. And he's also a current mentor at Zinc and the EIT food incubators in London and Cambridge. So I think you have a lot of background in the area, and I appreciate you joining on. So I thought that maybe you could help kick us off before we get into the alternative protein space.
For sure. Yeah, very, very happy to do so. So I've got a slide deck here, which I'll share with you guys. And I just need to press a couple of buttons here to do so. And then we'll be good. Here we go. How's this? Can you see?
Yep.
Can you see this slide that's going through? It should be a title slide that says alternative protein.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right. Well, hello from London. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you're all well and safe and comfortable wherever you're dialing in from. It looks like there's a lot of people joining, so it's very exciting. We are basically going to spend 15 minutes going through what alternative protein actually refers to, what the present state of the industry is, what the future states of the industry can be, and what they might look like, what we're likely to see happening in the coming couple of years, and then how we can actually get there collectively. So, first of all, what actually is alternative protein? It's a collection of products and services that provide sources of protein for human and animal consumption using novel, sustainable, animal cruelty-reducing technologies. The alternative protein industry is revolutionizing animal agriculture, completely reconsidering what meat and dairy are made of and how they're made, leveraging new technology from other fields, such as plant science, to extract components from plants and combine them to make realistic meat alternatives. Synthetic biology to create new microorganisms which produce real milk proteins, and tissue engineering to grow animal cells in bioreactors instead of whole animals in farms. We are going to hear from pioneers in these categories in the coming panels, so I won't dive too much into that. But for now, let's look at why it's actually important to have an alternative way to source protein. An average person consumes about 18 kilos of protein per year. 37% of that comes from animals. So that's 50 million tons of animal protein per year used to feed the globe's population. It comes at a great cost, though. It's incredibly inefficient, terribly cruel, leads to climate change, and it's quite a significant contributor, and has recently been linked to the creation of superbugs, which is particularly important at the moment, given the issues we've all got with COVID around the world. So more than half of our habitable land is agricultural, which we see here. And we basically use 23% of that to grow crops, and most of it's used for livestock and for the food that we feed the livestock. However, we get relatively little of our calories and our protein from that livestock. People really, really want meat, but the small amount of land that we use to grow crops actually provides most of our food. So this is ridiculously inefficient. The livestock are very, very poor at converting their food into our food, if we view them as machines to do that. And in some cases, they output less than 10% of what we actually give them as usable meat products. So beef is particularly inefficient. The grain we feed to animal products each year could feed 3 billion people instead. So it's pretty ridiculous and abhorrent that so much of our global population is at risk of starvation. Factory farms have become very widespread in recent decades. Our increasing global demand for land for urban development and other uses, the increasing cost of land that results from that, and the demand for ever cheaper meat and more meat has led to incredibly intense farming conditions becoming much more widespread and standard in many places. So 70 billion animals are actually reared in factory farms each year today. And this causes incredibly intense suffering, which if we have an eye on our moral burden is something that should be very important to us. Animal agriculture, as I said, is also responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, and the estimates range from 19 to 29% of the total. It's actually responsible for a lot of the non-CO2 emissions as well, methane in particular. And half the world's antibiotics are fed to animals in factory farms. So we're basically looking at a looming antibiotic crisis. There are a lot of discussions ongoing about this, and meanwhile, we're basically having to pump factory farmed animals full of antibiotics to help them avoid some of the issues that come with living in very intense conditions like that. The consequences here could eventually significantly dwarf COVID if change doesn't happen. So not if, but when, and really a matter of having to change some things here. These issues aren't going away either. The world population, as we know, has increased massively over the last 100 years. And the WHO and others basically predict it to grow incredibly quickly in the coming decades and centuries as well. So these issues are all going to intensify. Population's a major driver of them. We have a limited amount of land, limited amount of resources, and we're trying to create more and more meat. So we do need to change things quite significantly. Alternative protein offers the opportunity to massively reduce our land usage, water usage, and greenhouse gas emissions, and to remove animal consciousness from the equation, enabling much more efficient animal protein production with no suffering. Alternative protein products can be made in a sterile environment without risk of contamination, and we can make only the products we desire, such as muscle, and much more rapidly, so we can hugely reduce wastage and flex supply in response to demand. We have a lot of advantages, which we've listed here, but this is only some of them. The link at the bottom is really, really interesting. Chris Casarolos from the Cellular Agriculture Society has put together 90 reasons why alternative protein is much, much better than conventional. Where are we now? Protein production via fermentation or tissue engineering has existed for many decades, mostly with pharmaceutical applications. But when bringing this to the plate, there are two issues. Really expensive, and nobody actually cares about protein. When was the last time you heard someone say that protein tastes amazing? What makes food good are the other components, mostly fat, texture, and flavor compounds. So it's not that useful to be able to create proteins. We really need to think about much more outside of that. When creating alternatives, people need to focus on affordable, delicious protein. At the moment, the industry is mostly concerned with finding new, much more efficient ways to reproduce the experiences we're used to deriving from animal products, as consumers feel safer exploring new technologies if they can reproduce familiar experiences. This idea of standing on familiar ground whilst exploring a new way to create that is very, very important. It's an incredible time to do this technologically and culturally, so the space has been rapidly evolving. Just 2 years ago, this is basically the companies who were involved in the alternative proteins industry just 2 years back. Fairly small handful of clean protein or cultivated meat, as we refer to it now. We've got companies that are well known like Memphis Meats there. Plant-based proteins starting to emerge. There are quite a few more companies there. But today, just 24 months later, we have this many companies. So these are from Olivia Fox-Caban's new protein maps. And these are just a crop of the maps, just showing the actual companies involved in the space and making consumer products. If you look at the rest of the map, a lot of investors have gotten into this space as well. But it is still very much early days because the meat industry is colossal and most of these companies are brand new. The plant-based industry has taken off in a very big way. You can't walk down a high street in London or any other major city without seeing adverts everywhere for new plant-based options. While it seems like there's little else to be done, there are huge gaps for the industry to thrive. Most new entrants to the space have very little familiarity with its complexities, and they gravitate towards making something intuitive, such as consumer products, meatballs, sausages, etc. At the moment, most of the products you'll see are very basic, and in the cell-based meat or cultivated, they tend to be ground meat products as well. The opportunity to actually structure tissue is, so things we're familiar with like steak is very much absent at the moment. Some people will spend a couple of years at a more mature company, such as Impossible or Memphis Meats. Then they'll understand their later stage pain points and they'll work into the industry from there. But even that's quite rare. Nobody has a clear view of the needs of the industry and how these will evolve in the coming decade as we move to more complex products. So upstream, looking at bioreactor design and cell culture, other inputs for these consumer products are very much neglected at the moment. To create a new industry, we need to ensure that the ecosystem is ready to support it. This includes auxiliary services, such as suppliers, equipment manufacturers, consultants, financial institutions comfortable with long-term returns, legislators, policymakers, distributors, food manufacturers, chefs. Of course, all these stakeholders need to be aligned globally, all need to work together. And if we are to accelerate the alternative proteins industry at its sort of maximum pace and really mainstream this, then some very strong coordination is required. So how do we actually get there? We need coordination across the industry, as I've said, to approach the challenges systematically with impact in mind, whilst listening to experts across disciplines. My co-founder at Counterfactual Ventures and we came together at the start of this year to create a new way of supporting the alternative proteins industry. As Shiv said, I'd been working in the industry myself at New Age Meats, and we explored lots and lots of options for entering this space and concluded that the absolute best way to do so is to build a venture studio with an impact institute. So thinking about exactly what to build to support the industry and fill consequential gaps that help existing companies overcome complex technical hurdles and fill in the other parts of the industry, as I've just alluded to in the last slide. We're pulling together some of the world's foremost experts in systems thinking and industry and technology mapping, plant science and molecular biology, among other scientific disciplines, entrepreneurship, impact researchers, thought leaders, existing leaders in this industry, and the result will be as impactful as it is scary when mapped out. We've basically got 4 areas to what we're building, and this is obviously quite difficult to navigate, but it is on our website, and I'll point you to that afterwards. So up here, we have the work being done by our institute primarily, so the ideation research. We're basically partnered with the Good Food Institute at the moment to look at the gaps in the industry at present, understand the impact of filling each of them, understand whether these gaps are likely to be addressed already, and then understand the profitability of doing so, to create basically a short list of 8 company concepts for building in the coming year. We're basically launching a cohort to build these between September and December at their pre-seed stage. We're working with a very wide network of collaborators to basically source world-class founders for these companies. So bringing these 16 founders in and matching them with each other, supporting them at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, and bringing commercial experts and scientific and technical experts together. And as I said, we're then basically going to build 8 companies between September and December, funding them with up to $150,000 pre-seed funding. supporting them with entrepreneurs in residence and science in residence, and basically a program which we'd be very, very happy to tell you more about. Do get in contact with us if you'd like to build an important company, become a founder, collaborate with us by getting involved in our research and venture building. We're looking for EIRs and SIRs, as I said. Invest in us. We're building a $1.2 million fund at the moment to support these companies, and we'll be in need of some further funding on that. And we're generally looking to talk to anybody who's interested in what we're doing here as well. Thank you very, very much indeed. Real pleasure to talk to you. Do reach out and say hi. My contact details are here, and I'm sure the slides will be available afterwards, so you can pull the information out of those. And I'd really like to direct you to our website if it's of interest. It's at counterfactual.co, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, and I'm going to pass it off to the next panel. Thanks for the introduction, Hugh.